Jerry said it's that time of year again, isn't it? Love this time of year. I just don't love the schedule of this time of year. It's crazy. How many of you already have your houses decorated? Yeah? Okay. How many of you haven't yet decorated, but you are planning to decorate? There's a couple. Okay. Okay, good. We decorated our house the Saturday right after Thanksgiving. And I don't know, maybe I am a Scrooge in this way, but to me, decorating, I just don't get a thrill out of it. My wife is like, every year, so are you going to put lights outside the house? And my answer is always the same. No. No. It's too cold, for one thing. Do what? Why? Yeah, but it'll be cold when I have to take it down. So it still works, right? It still works. I don't know. I just don't get a thrill out of decorating. To me, it's work, right? But you gotta put all this stuff out for 1 month and then take it all right back down. It just, I don't know. Doesn't do it for me. What I do love about decorating, though, is seeing my kids' faces light up. You bring all the Christmas totes out of the basement and they start opening up like, hi! And it freaks them out, and I love seeing that face, right? And they get the same look in their eyes when they start opening presents, right? How many of you remember the looks on your kids' faces when I love that look, right? That excitement that they can barely contain in their little bodies. But then something happens to them. They become teenagers. Right? And then they get too cool to get excited over decorations, and they get too cool to get excited over presents. And then we even get older yet, and we get to be adults. And let's be honest here. If somebody gets us a present, we almost have to fake excitement. Right? Am I all alone in this? It's like, oh, you got me coffee mugs. Thank you. No, I'm just kidding. But you almost have to kind of fake the excitement because we know what is inside that package that we're getting ready to open up. There's, I don't know, maybe a jar of jelly from the Jelly of the Month Club. And thanks, right? Fruitcakes. I've never eaten a fruitcake. I don't ever plan to. I don't know. Here's the deal. That excitement that we have as kids, it goes away over time. Perhaps even to the point that we even get maybe even disappointed about getting gifts at Christmas. And what I want to say this morning is that disappointment that we sometimes sense around Christmas is a disappointment that we sometimes have in our spiritual lives as well. We came to know Jesus, and we thought that this was going to be like this great life where we're skipping on clouds of sunshine all the time and nothing ever goes wrong. And then reality sets in. Right? I was talking to somebody just earlier, and they said that, I don't know, they were talking about all the stuff that was going on in their world before they came to know Christ. And they came to know Christ. This was just this morning. They came to know Christ, and they said, and all that stuff was still there. I still had to deal with all that stuff. And that's the truth, isn't it? Christ does not say, oh, now you're my child, I'm going to make everything okay. I'm going to make all that stuff go away. It doesn't happen that way. We still have hurts. The difference is we got somebody to manage those hurts with us, right? Amen, church? We got somebody with us. But it almost can give us a sense of frustration that we can't seem to find that spiritual fulfillment that we're looking for. And at this moment, I know a lot of you are maybe even mentally checking out because you're thinking, I know where he's going with this. But let me encourage you. This message is for all of us. right? It's for everybody. It's for those that have known Christ for 50 years, and it's for those who don't know Christ at all. It's for people that at times you feel like something is missing. If you're here this morning and you ever feel like that something is just missing in life, raise your hand. All right, here's the deal, because if you're not raising your hand, you're probably lying. We all feel that way at some point. Something's not right. Something's not working the way it should be. Well, this week we're going to start a series. Actually, we're going to continue a series that we started last Christmas called Christmas Gifts. And over the next 3 weeks, we're just going to be looking at gifts that God gives us. Because here's the deal. Jesus came, right? That's what we're celebrating at Christmas, that Jesus came to earth as a baby. Can I tell you something? The reason Jesus came is to give. He came to give. He came to give himself. He came to bring us salvation. But there's all kinds of other things that he gives that comes right along with that. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at gifts that God gives us. And so this morning, we're going to be looking at the Christmas story as found in the book of John. So if you have your Bible, turn there with me. The Gospel of John, and we're going to be in chapter 1. And some of you are thinking, Christmas story of John? Yeah, it's there. It's there. It's just maybe hidden a little bit, right? And in the Gospel of John, maybe we will see maybe what we're missing or what has gone wrong. So read it with me, the Gospel of John, chapter 1. Let's begin in verse 1. This is reminiscent of Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, here's the thing. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 2, He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. We're going to stop right there. Through Him all things were made. The word literally there, I looked up the Greek, and I'm not going to say, well, this is what the Greek, who cares, right? But here's what we need to know. The Greek word there, where it says, where he says, through him all things were made. The word there for all were made is the word became. Through him all things became. And we're going to go back to that little word over and over and over. Through him all things were made. Through him all things became. All right, so keep that in mind. Let's keep going. Verse 3. Through him all things became. Without him nothing became that has become. Right? You see how that works? It's the same word over and over there. Through him all things became. Without him nothing became that has become. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is John's introduction to the incarnation of Jesus Christ. And what he says here is powerful, and it is poetic, and it talks very deeply about what it means that Christ has come to this earth. And it speaks powerfully to Christians, yet it also speaks very powerfully to our culture. You see, cultural spirituality says that you can worship anything as long as it makes you happy. Cultural spirituality says that any religion is equally okay as long as it personally makes you happy. And listen, that ideology is infecting the church. Because it's not just a cultural value. It's a problem we have in evangelical culture as well. What we see in modern evangelicalism is that many people worship a Jesus that agrees with them. I don't know, maybe you know some of these people. And it's so nice that Jesus agrees with me, right? I mean, Jesus is mad at the same people that I'm mad at. And as it happens, Jesus would vote for the same people that I vote for. How many of you thought that when you looked at that? I think Jesus would vote for him. Yeah, he would, because that's how I feel, so that's who Jesus would vote for. Right? And isn't that wonderful? Things that upset Jesus, that just so happens to be, coincidentally, the things that upset me. And of course, The things that Jesus overlooks, again, coincidentally, happen to be the things that I don't think are quite that bad. You see the problem here? We have made Jesus into our own image rather than acknowledging him as God. We've made Jesus into who we want him to be. If I'm unhappy about something, my assumption is that Jesus is unhappy about it too. And in that sense, we have allowed the world's culture to infect our own culture. And we simply shrug our shoulders and say, whatever, as long as it's okay with me. That's not the picture of God here in John 1. That's not the picture of who Jesus is. In John 1, we have a much bigger picture, a much firmer picture of who Jesus is. And what we learn is that true spirituality does not worship the Jesus that we want. True spirituality worships the God who is. He is the Creator. He is the living Word of God. And it turns out that Jesus does not always agree with me. We bought into the culture and made Jesus what we want him to be rather than worshiping him for who he is. He's the Creator of the universe. Through him, all things became. The Bible says that he's the Word. Now, volumes have been written about that little phrase. He is the Word. And I'm not going to go into it in detail. I'm trying to take just a very high-level overview of this. But I'm simply going to just tell you that to say that he is the Word, that means that he is God's way of communicating with us. It's God's way of communicating. Jesus is God's method of communicating with us. He is the light in a dark world. He shows us the way. And if he is the Creator, and if he communicates, what he communicates is this. It's the answer to the question, how are we to be the people of God? How are we to be the people of God? On a grand scale, Jesus communicates with us how we are to be the people of God, how we are to live. On a personal scale, he is my Creator. He created me for his purposes. And so he communicates to me that he wants me to live his way. He is my light. And if I pay attention, Jesus has things that he wants me to do. Now, not to earn his favor, we can't do that. Amen, church? We can't do that.
Sure.
But he has things that he wants me to do out of love and devotion to him. He wants me to understand who he is, not what I want him to be. So our first challenge in the text this morning is to examine our own notions of Jesus and decide, am I worshiping the true God, or am I worshiping the God of my own creation? Who am I worshiping this morning? Moving on, verse 6. Verse 1 through 5 gives us the big picture of who Jesus is. Now beginning in verse 6, we're going to see the small picture of who we are. Okay, verse 6. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. And by the way, that little word that became is in there. There was a man sent from God. There was a man that came from God. It's the same word there, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning the light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light, but he came only as a witness to the light. So what then is John's role? John's role is to talk about Jesus and to say, this is who he is. He's the Messiah. That's his purpose. That's what he's made for. John came from God. Just like all of the rest of creation came from Jesus, John had a purpose, and it was God's purpose. And once again, spiritually, I think our culture has this mixed up. Cultural spirituality is all about personal improvement. And you see this all over the place. This idea that God is here to center our lives. That God becomes whatever makes me the person that I am intended to be. God is all about personal improvement and fulfillment. And here's the deal. There's something profoundly wrong with that. Now, it sounds good, doesn't it? It doesn't. God came to make me better. That just sounds good. But it's not entirely true. It's not the God that we see in Scripture. But many Christians have bought into it because it sounds so good. God's going to make me better. We use phrases like, I invite Jesus into my heart. I invite God to be a part of my life. And those are fine statements. But many times they're interpreted more like this. I'm inviting God into my way of doing things. As if you and I were the center of the universe. Right? On its face, it sounds okay. But it's missing something terribly significant. Every night, when it's bedtime at my house, I give my kids piggyback rides to the beds. They love it, right? And sometimes they even fight over whose turn it is to give a piggyback ride to bed, right? And so one night not long ago, I told Levi it was his turn to get a piggyback ride. And I said, you know, Levi, we're going to do something different tonight. You're going to give me a piggyback ride. And so this little 75-pound boy says, okay. And his 200-pound dad gets on his back, and guess what happens? Boom. Oh, Daddy! Oh, heavy Daddy! That's what he says up there. Thanks, son. Right? You know, sometimes we treat God as though when we invite him into our lives, now we're walking around with God on our shoulders. We're still in the driver's seat. We're still deciding where we go and what we're going to do. But it's better because we got Jesus on our backs. Right? Here's reality. God doesn't roll like that. To be a Christian means to jump on God's back. Let him be in the driver's seat. Let him be in control. And we go where he wants us to go. John came from God. He had a purpose from God. He's got a mission from God. And as John, the author of the book, tells us about John the Baptist here in this passage, he invites the entire church to see that that is our mission as well. Our mission is to make Jesus known. That we have a deeper purpose than just inviting Jesus into our lives. To bless all those things that we're doing. There's something deeper and more significant. There's a deeper and more significant version of spirituality than letting God into the things that we're doing. True spirituality invites us into the things that God's doing. Let's move on, verse 9. I hope all that makes sense. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. See, in verse 10 there we see creation language again. He was in the world, and the world became through him. Once again, John points out that Jesus is the creator. And he says Jesus came to his own, but his own didn't recognize him. Jesus comes, and the culture doesn't recognize who Jesus is. Very clearly, our world has this problem. Culture tries to find fulfillment in tons of different ways. One that I'll highlight this morning, and there's tons, but I'm just going to highlight one. One way our culture tries to find fulfillment is through accumulation. All you got to do is look at Black Friday, right? Now listen, I'm not against a good deal. In fact, I went to Black Friday this year. I just went after all the crowd dissipated, and turns out there was still tons of stuff there, so I didn't even have to fight anybody. I just went and picked up what I wanted and checked out and just go on. But, you see people camping out for like 20 hours just to save a few bucks. We live in a culture that finds its fulfillment through shopping, through job promotions, through accumulation of money, through accumulation of square footage in our homes, through accumulation of a nicer neighborhood. We live in a culture that thrives on accumulation. And guess what? Modern evangelical spirituality does the same thing. The church has exactly the same problem. We are barely more generous than everybody else. We are just as engaged in retail therapy. We are just as engaged in accumulating more money. And just like modern culture, it's leaving us spiritually bereft. We're bereft of spiritual fulfillment. We've completely and utterly failed to cast off the shackles of our culture in this area. As they want more and more, so do we. And it's not working. It's not working. There are churches all over this country that have the greatest stages. Their buildings are just grandiose. And I'm not against that, right? I would love to have like the stage where, there's tons of room for all kinds of band members and stuff. I'd love to have that. There's nothing wrong with it in and of itself. But when we think that that's what gets us there, there's a problem. There's a problem. It's not working. Let's pick it up in verse 12, and we'll kind of bring all this back together here at the end. Verse 12. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become, there's that word again, to become the children of God. So we have becoming as creation. We have Christ himself becoming. John becoming. Now we have us becoming. Becoming children of God. Verse 13. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision, or of a husband's will, but born of God. See, people who truly recognize the Jesus of the Scriptures, they find spiritual fulfillment as a new creation. So much of modern evangelical spirituality is spent trying to make us better people, to have better marriages, or to make us better parents, so that we can manage our finances better, and all those types of things. And listen, there is nothing wrong with those things. I believe the church should address those issues. But we have to understand that that is not Christianity. You are not a Christian simply because you attend a parenting class at church and you learn how to become a better parent. You're not a Christian just simply because you come to church and you sit and you hear a preacher spat out some words that doesn't get it. That's not Christianity. Ravi Zacharias once said this. He said, Jesus did not come to make bad people good. Really? I thought he did. No. He came to make dead people alive. He didn't come to better our lives. He came to make you new. He came to make you a new creation. We find our spiritual fulfillment when we jump into God's river, when we jump onto God's back, and we let him have his way with us. When we embrace his way for living, to embrace what he wants us to do. And when we do that, John talks about we become. Listen, if I can be blunt, for so many of us, especially the Christmas season, it highlights a sense of loss for us. We get to thinking about how we've lost our parents or our grandparents. Or maybe it's even broken relationships with our families. Maybe it's a loss of a spouse. And the Christmas season brings all those emotions to us. And it hurts, doesn't it? We're here. John's words have such a hopeful tone to them. And so I want to tell you this morning that if you feel that loss, I get it, and I understand, but it doesn't have to cripple you. You are chosen by God. You are His child. And so as you negotiate those aches and pains throughout this Christmas season, as you negotiate those losses, rest assured of this, that if you have come to Jesus, and if you're riding on His back, then you are His child. And He's carrying you. He's carrying you. And even as you feel those losses, He embraces you. John finishes up here in verse 14. He says, the Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. We have seen His glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning Him. He cried out, saying, this is the one I spoke about, when I said, He who comes after me has surpassed me, because He was before me. Out of His fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth became through Jesus Christ. The Word became flesh. And then He made His dwelling among us. The word there is actually the word He tabernacled among us. I like what Eugene Peterson said about this passage. He said that this means God moved into my neighborhood. I like that. God moved into my neighborhood. And then in verse 17 again, grace and truth became through Jesus. There's so much here, but so much we don't have time for. But John finishes up by saying, listen, Christ is coming. And Christ makes God known. And so if you want to know God, you can only know Him through Jesus. What we have is the God who is, and He is seen through Jesus, who is not the God that I want Him to be, not the God that I wish Him to be, but the God who is. And it's very easy around Christmas to lose sight of all this. This time of year we are incredibly busy. So many things on our calendars. I mean, night after night's going to be occupied, right? And in the midst of all that, we're going to light candles, and we're going to have decorations, and there's going to be gifts, and all of that can easily distract us from what's really going on. And this is a celebration of the God who is, sending His Son, Jesus, to make Him known. So we have to remember that our lives and everything that we do, it's about God, His mission, and His people. It's about God, His mission, and His people. Our lives are to be about what He's doing in the world. Everything else is just decoration. Everything else is just decoration to the centerpiece. And so I pray that you have a Jesus-centered Christmas. And that if you're frustrated with your spiritual life, that you'll seek Jesus and jump on His back. Let Him carry you. Because that is where you'll find true spiritual fulfillment. Nowhere else. Nowhere else. Not until you jump on God's back will you find spiritual fulfillment.